these types of topics can be quite shameful, even if we've got nothing to be ashamed about. It can be shameful. So, yeah, I do think it's important to get our stories out, to say, we're here, we made it. There are better ways to live than, settling for less.
Welcome to Where's My Money? One man, $1 million of debt, one podcast to find a way out.
Where's My Money is sponsored by Enable Me. Figuring out financials can be daunting. Master your money and stop living paycheck to paycheck. Get practical tips and expert advice on budgeting, debt management and savings with Enable Me, helping Kiwis get money fit. Welcome back to Where's My Money? We've just rolled out of Mental Health Awareness Week, and to show homage to an important time of the year, I wanted to investigate a form of abuse that's often overlooked: financial abuse. If you've never heard of it, we're talking about a tactic used to control someone by restricting their access to money, sabotaging their ability to earn, or making them financially dependent. This isn't just about money, it's about the power and control that can come with it. Ashley and Emily are here to share their personal experiences with financial abuse. Their stories are going to shed light on how this form of abuse affects their mental health, often leading to anxiety, depression, and a sense of helplessness, but also some positive upsides in terms of the law. I'm hoping their insights are going to help us understand the link between financial abuse and mental health, and why it's crucial to address both in our conversations about well-being when it comes to money. Let's start with Ashley's story.
So I was with my partner for 4 years, and in our relationship, he predominantly earned more than me. He didn't really have a stable job. He kind of hopped around jobs a lot. I was a preschool teacher in training, and we moved in together really quickly. And now that I look back, I actually see some of those financial red flags early on. He moved in with me and my mum. I was only 18 at the time, because he didn't see the point in paying to live somewhere else if he was just kind of staying over with me. So then he was there. He, purchased my sister's car. She'd left the country off my mum, but didn't actually make payments. My mum helped him pay for the dentist. He never actually made those payments, but I think I was just too oblivious to that at the start. So
like you said, you were in the love bubble,
yeah,
so you know.
Yeah, and you idealize this life that you want with someone, and you want to see the good in them. And so,
we're raised to do that.
Yeah.
Particularly, I think Kiwis, we're trusting people, and you truly want to see the best in everyone.
Yeah.
Strangers, people you love, people you've just met, like it should be the default.
Yeah. And so it kind of, now I know it started at the very start, but like throughout the relationship, it crept in more and more. There was payments coming when we did end up getting a joint account when we were engaged. There was extra payments coming out for things left, right, and centre. He always had an explanation for it though, and then
were these little things? Little payments, big payments, a combo?
It was kind of small payments, but it was kind of often, and I never quite understood how. Because essentially his account didn't have the money for them, so they were defaulting to coming out of the joint account because his name was on it. But it was kind of like small amounts, but often enough that it was really starting to add up. But he still managed to explain it away. And then the credit cards started accruing, the loans started accruing. And I think the biggest thing that people struggle with when I go into my story is everything was in my name. So they're like, well, how was it relationship to you? How was it him? But, it comes back to he had a poor credit rating. He had all these reasons why he couldn't get credit. So he's like, we need this for this. We moved out together, and unfortunately, the house we moved into was damaged by the Kakura earthquake. So we very quickly, 8 weeks after moving out of home, had to find somewhere else to live, and we'd moved into an established flat. So it was then, we need to buy furniture, we need to buy everything. I'm quite a savvy op shopper. I would have been happy just to kind of get anything we could, but it was suddenly, let's get a credit card. And it was one of those wonderful ones where it's like 6 months interest free if it's over $250. But as soon as you have a couple of $250 purchases on there, there's no way you can keep up with the interest on those.
No way. Plus establishment fees and the rest of it that comes with
and
those.
And then it was kind of a loan to consolidate the credit card, and I had a small car loan, and then that crept into another 2 credit cards. So by the time I left the relationship, I had 3 credit cards and a loan all in my name. And it was crippling, and even beyond leaving, it was consistently draining the joint account. We'd put our relationship property into a storage unit on legal advice, and we were going to pay 50-50, never paid a cent towards that. So I was then starting a new life and having to fork out all of these costs and paying for all this debt. And the thing that is so crazy to me is, seeing that in that scenario, I genuinely believed I couldn't live a good life without him, even knowing he was making the debt get deeper and deeper. It even got to the point where for our wedding, we had kind of divvied out the costs for our wedding. We didn't have an extravagant wedding. We were, happy with what we were doing, but the things that he said he would pay for, it became to a month out where we had to start paying stuff and he had no money to pay for anything. And I had kept to myself the real extent of the situation. So my mum went and got a loan to cover his costs for the wedding.
Oh, man.
And it breaks my heart because I should have let people know that how bad it was, but I let her do that, and I let her, she wasn't in a position, she had to get a loan to do that. But she wanted to see me happy, and she wanted to see the best in the situation. But yeah, and when about 6 months after I left him, I ended up without a job up here in Wellington, not really sure what to kind of do with myself because I had no way to pay all of this crippling debt. The benefit that I was entitled to did not cover all my debt payments, let alone
Living costs. Yeah, actually living.
And the irony of the whole thing is, I'm now working in the finance sector, and I almost did a no asset procedure to get rid of the debt and get free from that because I thought there was no other way. That was the advice I was given. There's no way out of this. But thankfully, my mum came to the rescue, and I will be forever grateful. The strangers I was living with let me live there for free for 4 weeks.
Wow.
Whilst I figured my life out.
Yeah.
Because if I did that no asset procedure, I would not be sitting here today having this conversation with you.
Well, what does that mean for someone who's
so
like me and doesn't know much? What does that actually mean?
A no asset procedure is kind of a step down from bankruptcy. So if the debt that you have is under $50,000, you can file a no asset procedure. So essentially, it clears the debt, but you've got restrictions on you. You won't be able to lend and different things. And
it's going to slow you down getting a mortgage, more credit cards.
Yeah. So I think
starting a business.
Yeah. So I think it's probably 5 years for a no asset procedure that impacts your credit record. So, every job I've had since I've moved into the finance world, you have to have a credit check and put if there's any bankruptcy or no asset procedures or judgments made.
It's like a mini bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Bankruptcy light.
Yeah.
You didn't have to do that though. You managed to swing by on the kindness of some other people who gave you that gap to try and figure things out.
Yeah. So when I moved, so I'm originally from the South Island. I moved up to Wellington on a 6-month contract to get away from my ex-husband, and so that 6-month contract came to an end. And this is during late 2020 when everyone's trying to get new jobs post COVID.
Yeah.
So I'd been applying, going to so many interviews, and I was really lucky. I was living with literally strangers that I met the day I turned up at their house to move in, and they knew that I was going through some legal processes at the time, and I was doing a course at Women's Refuge, and my only wish was to finish my course at Women's Refuge because I was learning so much and really understanding the extent of what I'd been through. And so they said, you can stay here for free for the next few weeks, sort yourself out, get back on your feet. And mum helped bridge the gap between the benefit that I was receiving and the actual cost of my bills. And I'd made a good friend, so their family kind of, fed and watered me a bit and things.
Awesome.
So I couldn't have got through that without it. And then I was really lucky that I did manage to get a job. And then that's when I kind of moved into solution mode. I was like, this is crippling.
Yeah. Well, because it's great that you've had a lot of positives come up through this to try and again, bridge the gap. Your mum's there. Some strangers have helped you out of the kindness of their hearts, which is a great Kiwi tale to tell. But you're still married to this guy, right? The law says you're still married. So that's when, is this the solution mode you're talking about getting into?
So there was two avenues I went down. Firstly, I was like, how do I get out of this debt? I don't want to do a no asset procedure.
Yeah.
I've just got my first job in the finance sector. I'm actually quite enjoying this. How do I pay this debt down? So that's when
Without robbing a bank.
Without robbing a bank,
Yep.
We're talking, 3 credit cards and a loan, and I'm on not much above minimum wage. And now living in a city, not a small town. So working through that and figuring out the best way to kind of consolidate some of it. And one of the big things that really helped in that space is I was actually working at a financial ombudsman at the time. And so I was kind of learning a bit more about like the legislation and what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
And I learned about responsible lending. And I took that away and I thought about it, and I realized that one of the loans I received was definitely not responsible lending, and that they had breached their obligations. So
Fantastic. I'm all about this kind of loophole finding.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
sticking it to the man.
The all financial service providers in New Zealand have to have an independent dispute resolution scheme. Yep. It's a legal requirement, and it's free for the consumer to access. So there's 4 different ones. The banking ombudsman's obviously one for banks, and then there's 3 others. So I went to the ombudsman that this lender was a member of, and I put in a complaint. And it was a bit of a long process to kind of collect all the evidence and kind of work through it with them. It did take a few months, but
Wow.
the end, it was discovered that they'd breached their responsible lending obligations. And so I went from a loan with 29% interest to 3.99% interest.
Oh, amazing.
And a portion of interest paid was rebated onto the loan. So that was probably a really huge win for me.
That's massive, not just for you, but for the little guy, I love those stories. This is fair go in real life, and cool, that's a great little win there.
Yeah, so that made a big difference, and obviously having 3 credit cards, I consolidated those. There's always some great balance transfer options out there. So
yeah, there's always those around. How is it at this point? Your mental health would have been
terrible,
but that little win must have given you a little kick up the bum to go, yes, this is momentum now.
It made it feel real that I was going to be debt free. It made, the amount of debt didn't drastically decrease, but I was like, okay, I'm not paying more just for the sake of the lender and interest.
Yeah.
And I now don't have 3 credit cards and a massive loan.
Did you say 29%? That's just clicked.
Yeah.
Holy shit. That is, I don't know if I've ever heard of an interest rate that high.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would have been absolutely crippling you. That snowballing month on month, year on year.
Yeah. Yeah.
No bueno. Back to 3.9. Okay, good. Yeah, that's just clicked to me. Holy moly.
Yeah. So, it wasn't a great situation to get into in the first place, but I think that it was a big win, and mentally, I needed that. I think it was in that moment where I was kind of like, okay, cool. And when I looked at things, I was like, I started to really look into kind of the avalanche versus snowball methods that they talk about in debt. And I was like, I really think that I need some kind of instant gratification almost. And I was like, I'm going to pay off the smallest one because I just kind of want to get it gone. So I did that.
If you can't make the debt smaller overall, make the list smaller at least to feel like progress. Yeah.
So then that felt really good. And then I looked at things and I was like, well, the loan, I want it gone, but it's 3.99%. Who else is going to have a personal loan at that? We're talking that's a mortgage rate. So I left that till last, and I smashed out all of the credit card debt, especially because I'd done some balance transfers, and the credit cards were gone. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm actually going to be debt free. And it was just absolute disbelief. And so during this time, I was going hard on the debt. I think the last year that I was paying towards my debt, I was paying 35% of my income towards my debt payments because I was that determined. Because I think with financial abuse, this is the other thing you've got to think about. It took me 4 years to pay off my debt, even through that process I went through.
Well, you can't just put 100% of your income to the debt because then you're not living.
So it took 4 years. So every single payday,
Yep.
I was reminded of him.
Yep.
I was reminded of
Still
who got
winning.
me into that situation, and he had this hold over me.
Mm.
And it was like I resented payday. Like most people are like, yay, we're getting paid. I resented it because it was this constant reminder.
Yeah, he's kept you in this hole for
Yep.
an extended period of time and stopping you from doing or living your life. You know,
Yep.
that could have been holidays, the car,
Yep.
you know, like...
Yeah. And then alongside that, I was still married to him.
Yeah.
So I always knew that you had to be separated for 2 years to be able to get a divorce in New Zealand.
And I think that's pretty common knowledge, right? Like that's
Yep.
just you got to, that's for whatever reason. I don't know what that reason is.
It's about protecting the sanctity of marriage. So it's when they move to no-fault divorces. So instead of having to prove adultery or anything like that, they moved to no-fault. So to show that it was irreconcilable differences, you separated for 2 years, basically, instead of pointing the finger at what was wrong with your partner.
Okay.
And it's like a 40-something-year-old law, and it's definitely founded around kind of the Christian principles.
I was going to say it sounds pretty churchy.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating for a lot of people who don't lean that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're a very, very culturally diverse country. And,
Totally.
You know, we all have our own beliefs, and not all of us subscribe to that. So
Or necessarily subscribe to all of it because
Yes,
marriage
yeah.
in its essence is kind of a churchy thing, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
But then the rest of it has to be churchy, and then the government. Anyway, that's another podcast, isn't it?
So, so I had to stay married to him, and what you can do in New Zealand is you can go through a legal separation. So you can do that at any point after you've separated, and that's where you do the division of assets.
Sure. Or the division of debt, right?
In New Zealand, we don't really have a system equipped to deal with debt. The courts are more interested if there's assets at play.
Right.
So it's really hard if you are not getting engagement from your ex or their lawyer and getting kind of anywhere in terms of mediating through that.
Yeah, because everyone's going to want to get in touch about the assets because they
Yeah.
want their stuff back. But in terms of, well, they want their stuff
Yeah.
and their future money. But the debt, no one's fighting over that. No one's
fighting over that, unfortunately. So it does come into the division of property, but when you're not in an amicable situation, it can be really hard. And I started to really question the system I was up against. I packed up my whole life into my car and moved islands. And then I'm up against a system that just had no support or empathy for what I was going through. And
count down the clock. 2 years to go, buddy.
Suddenly 2 years felt a bit ridiculous. And I realised the mental impact of remaining tied to someone. I had no contact with him. I had a protection order in place. And I didn't live in the same town, so I pretty much never bumped into him.
Yeah.
Didn't have on any social medias, any of that. But it was the mental toll of, we're trying to separate this. I have to wait 2 years to do this. I'm going to have to find you in 2 years to do this. And I just felt trapped and like I couldn't move on.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started on my journey of Ashley's Law. In October last year, the law to change the stand-down period for victims of abuse to apply for a dissolution of marriage has gone from 2 years to as soon as you have a final protection order. So if you apply for the protection order when you leave the marriage, that could be as early as 3 months.
Fantastic.
So, unfortunately, I took almost 3 years to get my divorce through. That last year of working with a system that just had no understanding that they'd granted me a protection order but wanted me to find my ex-husband or contact his family or friends or email him or all the other things that I was not allowed to or had any appetite to do. There was a lot of backwards and forwards for a year before we were able to sort that out and get my divorce. But there's been some big celebrations the last 5 years.
I bet.
Debt-free day, celebrated that. Popped some champagne and my friends brought over some party poppers, and divorce day that came so unexpectedly after fighting all year for it. So that was monumentous. And then last year, sitting in Parliament, the bill passed unanimously on all 3 readings, and that does not happen.
Ashley's Law Day, that's the best one. And that was all the parties jumping in and going, no, we all agree to this, that is just so rare.
Yeah. So rare.
Labour and National going, yeah, no, this is fucked. We need to, we should fix this.
Yeah.
And you did that.
I did that, and you know,
must, all the bullshit that you had to deal with aside, you must feel immensely proud of that.
I feel so proud, but I think it still feels surreal because I fought for that for 4 years to make it happen, and I never gave up. And it was such a process to make it happen. Even on everyone I talked to said it was a quick win. I think it comes into effect this October. They needed a year to implement it. And
wow.
I think the moment someone contacts me and says they've used it, I think that's when it's going to really hit.
Yeah, totally. When know you are actually helping people day to day. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think back to how I felt when I finally got that divorce. It took 1,043 days to get my divorce. And that was, 1,043 days too long. So I think back to that feeling, and I'm like, so many more people are going to get that so much sooner. And my biggest takeaway out of everything I've been through is that I went through this for a reason, and I'm not going to not use my story to empower others and teach others that you can move past it. Financially, I thought I could never come back, and mentally at times. And now, I'm in a really stable job, really happy, have great people around me, and I'm rebuilding my life. I'm not perfect financially, and no
one is.
I'm not perfect, but I've come a long way, and I think that it just makes me more fiercely keen to educate around financial literacy. Because I also admit that prior to my husband, I definitely made some financial mistakes because I didn't have the financial literacy behind me. I come from a household where it was just standard to HP everything in our house, And
that's possibly some of those red flags in the initial parts of the relationship you might have missed just because of how you were raised with money on top of the love bubble you were in. You were probably just like, wow, this is kind of normal. Like, whatever, we love each other, so we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And didn't understand investing. My Kiwi saver, I was so protective of my money because I was like, but that's my money and I've worked hard for it. I want a different life to, the one I grew up in. And, and then just also financial abuse, because I think people really don't understand the depths of it and how deep rooted it is. And I just almost wish that there was more support out there for those that go through it, because I can still picture myself that day sitting on the couch, realizing the situation I was in and thinking that I couldn't live a good life, that I couldn't get out of that. But here I am 5 years later and I've done it.
And you're back in control.
Yeah.
That must feel very, very good.
It feels amazing.
Yeah. What do you want women to know if they are in any kind of abusive relationship? What should they know before they, make moves to try and leave?
I think my biggest thing is always have an understanding of your finances, and I'm a very firm believer in still having a personal account, all for joint accounts, all for openness and discussions around money. But my other big learning through all of this is find the people in your life that you trust to talk about money. Me and some of my friends are incredibly open about money now. I have a really good friend that is still in the trenches of paying off debt from her ex-husband and financial abuse, and we're so open about the highs and lows of money. And I know that it's not something that you talk about openly, and I get kind of the taboos around that, but find the people you trust and talk about it. And I think just knowing that there's a better life out there, it may not feel like it now, but there's so many agencies, support, and people that are there to cheer you on and see you succeed in life, and it doesn't have to be your forever.
So many cheerleaders you can go and recruit that are on your team, right? They just want to help, whether it's free or if it's paid advice or friends and family. Everyone does want to help.
Yeah,
you're right.
And I don't think there's a single hole you can't get out of.
Yeah. With Ashley's Law, what do you think still needs to change? I mean, that's a monumental thing that you achieved, pushing something through Parliament, 5,000 plus signatures to show MPs that this mattered. What do you think still needs to change on that front?
I really fought for the level of evidence to be different. So the Residential Tenancies Act has brought in the clause around being able to end a tenancy within 48 hours if you're a victim of abuse. And the level of evidence for that, it can be a letter from your doctor or from Women's Refuge or, a trusted organisation. And I think that in this case, I know so many people that are too scared to apply for a protection order, or so many people that don't feel like they want to go through that, because it is quite a traumatic experience. You really have to do quite a full-on affidavit about everything you've been through. So I really wish that more people could access it. But I also think that there's a lot that could happen in the legislation space around financial abuse. Because that is one thing with a protection order, for example, that's more focused on physical risk, but we also in New Zealand recognise financial, emotional, spiritual, sexual abuse, but we're focusing on protecting those that are physically at risk. But I think that the psychological damage of all of that is just as huge.
An incredible journey through the highs and lows of financial abuse and the remarkable impact one person can have on the system in general, not just on their own life. From spiralling debt to creating real change with Ashley's Law, her story showed just how closely money and mental health are linked. Next, we're shifting gears a little to hear from Emily, whose experience with financial abuse took a different shape, but it hit just as hard.
So when I was quite young, I was in a relationship in my late teens. I had come from a background of having moved out of home quite early and trying to be independent, not through really wanting to, but just a relationship breakdown at home.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a whole lot of supportive friends or places to turn, and the relationship that I had got myself into or had found, there were so many examples of the other person just not being mature, not being able to hold down jobs, spending money that there wasn't enough to go around. So just spending it frivolously, and it was just so stressful. And there was abuse going on. I was threatened a lot. I didn't really know much about domestic violence. I hadn't grown up amongst it. The places that I would go into, they sort of didn't do the checks that they do now, where they say, are you safe at home, at a doctor's appointment and whatnot. And so I really didn't know what I was involved in to be looking back on it. I was, young, silly.
Well, hindsight's 20/20. It's always easy to look back, but when you're in something, you often can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
And again, small, incremental, chip, you kind of don't notice things developing into something bigger, right?
Yeah. And then I fell pregnant, and we wanted to be parents, and it was just so difficult to sort of get everything together, just being so young, not having support, not having money to go around and buy these things. So it was looking for a house that we could afford to live in, and we ended up trying to move out of the city to get cheaper rent.
Yeah.
I'd approached the Housing New Zealand. I'd given up my job. There wasn't maternity leave back then. I just gave it up, and my partner wasn't working. There was no income, so I ended up going on a sickness benefit. I ended up staying in a campground until there was a Housing New Zealand house available that wasn't in between two different rival gangs on the same street. So, and all of this when I was about to be a mum at very young age.
This is when you're meant to be looking after yourself and relaxing and
being pampered,
glowing,
glowing and all that. So it was really a scary situation to be in, to be quite honest. And I wasn't looking to leave because I was terrified that I would just end up being beaten up if I tried, essentially. And that was terrifying, of course. So stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Particularly when there's a baby involved too. You want your kid to grow up with two parents and
Two loving parents, a safe home, food on the table, rent paid, and so yeah, I was really in a bit of a bind. My life didn't look good going forward, and then out of the blue, my son was 5 weeks old. His dad hadn't been around constantly, so I was at home by myself, and his sister knocked on the door, and she said, "You're going to have to come over to Mum's place. Daniel's died in a car accident." You just didn't expect that. And so in my unique situation, one of the first things that then went through my head is, even though I was in a Housing New Zealand house, it's like, right, every week my rent's going to be paid. That's one of the first things that went through my head, and that was the relief. And it's not that, I didn't, see lots of good things in my son's dad, and there were good things about him, but we definitely didn't have it together as young people. We were definitely not putting the right steps in place for, a healthy relationship and a healthy family. And all of a sudden, I went from a rock and a hard place to just a hard place.
To a really, I can't imagine it. I just can't put myself in those. So how did you rebuild from that?
Yeah. So
Or build, start from scratch? Like, what did that look like?
So much more calm. I mean, I was up all night, and I didn't go out much. I had a newborn baby to look after, who was just, the light of my life. I mean, so much happiness and
But you're safe now.
And I was safe. I no longer worried about, what next and what is he going to do next. So, yeah, this was a complete opportunity for me. And so I just really started chipping away at just learning was the first thing, learning how to be a mum, learning how to, get the things that I needed with the income that I had. I was encouraged to do a free course. It came with a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone. I'd driven myself down the road to a payphone to call my midwife at the time that I was going into labour, so in the middle of the night. So, yeah, it was just from those little gradual steps, learning, finishing courses, thinking, right, I've done that, what can I do next? Where do I want to be in life? And I was able to go on to end up studying a degree. I spent 7 years doing my degree over summer, each semester, working, parenting, and finally got there and had found myself a job in the financial services industry. So I now have a wealth of financial knowledge to be able to share and to be able to sort of guide people in whatever situation they are in now. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for what that education did for me in life.
I'm baffled. That story is crazy. I've got a couple of questions that I want to pick out of that. What was grief like when you've lost the person that is abusing you? That must, like, bittersweet doesn't sum it up, because those are two of the tiniest words to explain the emotions. What was that like?
I'd come from a place where a lot of stressful things were happening out of the blue a lot. So I really was sad that the accident had happened and that my son was going to be without a father for his life. And that didn't hit my son until he was about a teenager, you know. So having a baby, he didn't know any better, and so that was sort of a relief on my part. I was, just given the freedom to rebuild, really. It was just a whole heap of grace and space that I would never have had otherwise.
It sounds like less grief and more relief than anything.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's sad for your son and sad that someone has died, but realistically, it's all of that weight on your shoulders, that fear to walk around the corner and what's going to happen next just sounds unfathomable. So,
and I think, every day how I basically got the get out of jail free card compared to many people in abusive relationships. I didn't, leave. I didn't get the bravery and the ducks in a row or anything like that. I was not having to go through, the difficult situation, even for, a broken relationship. My son never had to deal with parents arguing over anything. There was, although it's a difficult situation, no one wants to be a parent on their own. A small family of two is a pretty small family, and with financial pressure as well, it means that you're either going to be on the benefit for a long time or you're going to be a working parent.
Yeah.
So, I just think that as you get older and you get wiser and you get more experienced, you just build these new goals. Once you start achieving the smaller ones, you start to think, well, I could do that, maybe.
Was it that financial pressure that led you to get into finance in terms of what you ended up studying and then obviously becoming a financial advisor? Was that your experiences that you wanted to then, stop people from having to go through? Was that it?
Yeah. I was very wise on how my choices were affecting my future. Looking ahead, I was, had the ability to study while I was a mum. I had the time, and I really did feel so empowered by learning about these different financial tools, insurances, for example, the importance that life insurance could have played in someone else losing a parent.
Yeah.
I didn't have that, and I was well aware of it. So, it gave me a lot of motivation.
You guys just flat out couldn't afford it, right? It wasn't even on the table at that point. Yeah. Insurance is the unsexy topic. That's we've always called it the most unsexy part of the podcast. It's always insurance. So financial advising, financial advising, you're a financial advisor.
Yes.
That's obviously how you're giving back and helping other people, but that's not the only way you're helping women these days, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think back to something that influenced me when I was a young person, new to the work careers and whatnot, and I'd actually been referred to the Dress for Success charity at one point, and for me that at that time they invited me in, they helped me get some nice workwear as sort of a gift to me, to support me as a woman and as someone who could do with a bit of support around either keeping a job or getting a job. And I always felt that was a really great, special thing that I'd received, because I wasn't able to go out shopping at the mall with friends on weekends, throughout my life. That sort of wasn't in my budget. I was an op shop girl as well at times. And so, just to know that support was there at the time, it actually made a difference. To have these extra clothes given to me. And then I've reconnected with the Dress for Success team recently and found out that they're doing so much more than just, more than a dress in a way. So there's different sessions that they'll run around the country in their different branches. I went to one the other week on building a capsule wardrobe. But then there's other things that the corporates can sort of do in conjunction with charities, and that's what our firm's doing at the moment. Is we are running a financial education session for free for these women, and that might just be that one moment of intervention that gives them the realisation to be aware of what they're facing, give them tools to be able to better their situation, and give them access to more resources. So I'm very excited to be a bit of a client ambassador for the Dress for Success charity.
Awesome. I love the it's the give a man a fish or teach a man to fish. It's the kind of the similar thing. It's giving someone the confidence to actually to take something on, own it, be confident in yourself, and then set yourself up potentially for life, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I love the angle of that. So
should I jump in and say that
please
I used
jump
them
in.
too?
Please jump in.
Because I did.
Yeah.
I used Dress for... I haven't even told you this. I used Dress for Success during that month where I was unemployed and about to do a no asset procedure.
Living with strangers, your mum's paying for everything for you.
I was a preschool teacher when I was in Blenheim, so obviously had a uniform, very casual, babies spitting up on you, and then moved up to Wellington in 2020, and because it was lockdown, it was a very casual office situation. I was in the office, but at the end of that, I was then looking at these kind of corporate finance jobs in the big city, and I wasn't equipped for that, and Women's Refuge referred me through to Dress for Success, and it was such an empowering experience because I didn't have the wardrobe, I didn't have the funds to do it, and also I didn't know how to dress corporate. Like, I grew up rurally, I'd worked at a preschool, like I was a small town gal. I was not equipped.
It's a bit of a gap to bridge very quickly, yeah.
And I went in for a session and they gave me an outfit for my interviews. So then they had this one outfit on repeat for my like 20 job interviews, but it was very grateful. But it was not interview fit. And then they gave me a whole week's worth of clothes, and it was such a cool session because they gave me the 5 outfits, but they also showed me how I could mix and match the outfits and make them go a long way. And because even though I was getting back into employment, I was in no financial position to get that kind of wardrobe, and it just took the pressure off when I was figuring out my finances to not turn up in this corporate job where I was trying to reinvent myself and put my best foot forward, and I felt the part. So it's been really exciting that Emily's kind of initiated our company getting involved with this. I know we did a clothing drive down in Wellington as well, and it's definitely something that I have given back to in terms of anytime I'm doing a wardrobe clear out, I'm like, they're a good place.
That's what my next question was going to be, how can we help Dress for Success if we want to?
Yes. Well, they do.
Possibly not my wardrobe's not going. Maybe a black t-shirt, maybe.
They do.
For the most part, they're collecting women's wardrobe, work-friendly work gear that is in good condition. But on occasion, they are also collecting menswear. Cool. So, yeah, absolutely. There's the website with all the donation drop-off spots.
Nice. We'll chuck that in the show notes so people can see how they can support. And to wrap it all up, I guess, final thoughts on how you can help other people who might be in this situation. Have you got a tip or just a piece of advice for someone who is in a similar situation to yours back then, or is getting out of there, or is thinking about it? Like, what would you say to them?
I would say that support systems really save and change lives. Being aware of the places that are really hoping to help people just like you. If you're out there, you don't have to make any firm decisions immediately. Just educate yourself, learn more, and find those people who are willing to go out and give you support, help. It doesn't necessarily need to be financial, but just even emotional support as well.
The more people in your corner, the better, eh? Yeah. Ashley, maybe from a specifically financial, angle, what advice would you give someone?
I think, I don't know.
You were saying earlier, knowing your position.
Yeah. I think knowing your position, and I think one of the biggest learnings that I've come away from it is, don't get me wrong, love to shop, love to, do things and have experiences, and life's for living, but have real goals to work towards. That was one thing that really helped me because, as you can imagine, I was putting such a huge part of my paycheck into debt when that I was out of that cycle, it could have been very easy to get back in it or just
Totally.
waste all my money because I suddenly had it. So
Fritter. You were about to say fritter.
I was going to say fritter.
It's the podcast buzzword, yeah.
I would have frittered a lot of money away.
But you would have wanted to celebrate. Like, no one would blame you for that.
I did celebrate,
Yeah.
but then it was just kind of locking in and being like, I actually need to have goals and
This is your
oversights.
moment now,
yeah,
yeah.
this is my moment to rebuild and having that oversight of your finances, and that's probably the biggest takeaway is have that oversight. And I think in terms of like things like Dress for Success and things like that, a lot of people that I've kind of met on this journey, it's like anything, they're always like, oh, but there's someone else worse off than me. And I think as Kiwis, we just have that mentality, but you're allowed to access those services. You know, if you're sick, you go to a doctor. So
You should.
Well, yeah. If you're sick, you go to a doctor and you don't question it, right?
That's right.
So why are you robbing yourself of support from the agencies and services that are there to support you? And it's a case of, you know, if you don't use it, then they lose funding and all of that. You know, they're there to help you. So don't make thinking others are worse off than you a barrier to accessing what you deserve.
Particularly if you're going to put off something that is going to snowball in your own life and make it a lot worse further down the track, right?
Yeah, definitely.
These types of topics can be quite shameful, even if we've got nothing to be ashamed about. It can be shameful. So, yeah, I do think it's important to get our stories out, to say, you know, we're here, we made it. There are better ways to live than, settling for less. So thanks for letting us share.
Today's stories show how small steps, finding support, learning and taking control of your finances can completely change your life, even in some pretty sticky circumstances. If you're in a tough situation, know that help is out there, whether it's financial guidance, emotional support, or practical programs like Dress for Success. Reaching out can make a real difference. You don't have to navigate it alone, and taking control now can set up your future for stability and growth. Check out the show notes for links to resources and ways to support others who are rebuilding too. We'll chuck them in there for you. Don't forget too that people like the great coaches that Enable Me can help you out financially, and there is zero judgment about whatever situation you find yourself in, and I'm speaking from experience there. Huge thanks to Emily and Ashley for sharing their incredibly powerful stories too. Join me next week where I'm going to be putting some potentially divisive questions about money to members of very different generations. The Gen XYZ roundtable is coming next time. Until then, keep asking the question, where's my money? Huge thanks to Enable Me for sponsoring this episode of Where's My Money? Navigating finances can be tricky. Take control of your finances and break the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. Get tips and insights on budgeting, managing debt and saving money with Enable Me, helping Kiwis get money fit.